Welcome to the Campfire Podcast. Oh, all right then. I guess we're back in style, baby. All right. Oh, it's the Campfire Podcast once again. Riley,
What's up?
Isaiah, you here?
What's up?
Xander, you here?
Hello.
Oh, we have Mike too.
Hi.
Oh man, this is exciting. Like Mike's voice kind of changed when he said that hi. I'm like, ooh, exciting. All right,
I'm
so
trying to go deep.
we're trying to go deep today in this episode. But before we do that, I'm gonna ask Riley to introduce our guest for today.
So today we have Michael Morgan Woodard. He is 40 years old. He moved to Maui when he was 9, so he's been here for 31 years. He is a friend, dad, cousin, brother, uncle, boss, and he's a couple of those to me too. But I've known Mike for maybe 3 years. I kind of really first met him in Wyoming, the first trip we went to, and that was super cool. And then the relationship grew, like the more we saw him around at church and at his house, how he always opened it up for parties and going after the beach and having ice cream and yeah, he's a really cool guy who's been influential in all of our lives, and he always asks us hard questions so that we say the words with our own thoughts and really get it in our mind. So we're excited to have Mike, and we're going to talk about the war on masculinity, and we're also going to talk about what Mike always says is kind of like his life thing is making sure that people are seen and loved and pointing them to who Jesus is too. So that's a little intro of who I think Michael Woodard is.
You think?
Yeah, or I know.
All right then, if that's what Riley thinks, Mike, who are you then?
I could go with that. I like that.
Oh wow,
I never sounded so good. I like it.
So that's like second time in a row, right? I said something and then the guest just said, "I like that." You nailed it.
Yeah, I told you I was going to do it.
He's on the roll. It's like third time actually. But so for context, I'm not really. Well, I shouldn't say I'm not really, but like the topics that we're gonna talk about today, like the war on masculinity, is something that Mike talks about a lot, and like with the men's group that I have only been a part of because I hang out with Riley, so I'm there by association. But you guys, the three of you, have been going to Mike's house, and you guys have been exploring like these topics in detail more than I have with him. And I think it is Isaiah brought up the topic of like the war on like masculinity and like what's all that like, and it was like, well, we can have Mike on because he talks about that stuff. It's like something that he talks about. So yeah, we're excited to have you on. Hopefully you enjoy being on with us. Yeah.
Hopefully the feeling is mutual.
Yeah, hopefully the feeling is me just like, oh yeah, Mike likes us too. Thanks.
Yeah, I like you guys.
Oh, thanks. That changes a lot. All right, so I guess the first thing we could talk about is like what, like for you, Mike, then the question would be, what does a man of God look like in the sense of the way you talk about masculinity?
Great question. Yeah, you're welcome. I guess I wouldn't really call it a war on masculinity, because I think we've always been living lives that, how do you say it? That, that aren't up to what we need to be. So God's called us a certain way and to be a certain way as men, and we just choose not to go into that, and we blame it on a lot of other reasons. But I don't think the war is as much on the outside as it is on the inside, and that we can choose every day to be a man who follows God and be a man who loves the people around us and pursues loving others, or we can be men who just sit back and want things to happen to us. So I think the war starts deep in our hearts, and it's not as much of a war against people or against things on the outside, but it's against lies that we believe.
Yeah. So, and then with the follow up to that is you've been having these guys at your house, like they transition from youth group to Mike's house. and then now they're like back into like the youth group leading. Like what has that journey been like? Like seeing them like grow in their like accepting or like walking into that like image of like I'm a man of God and this is what I'm gonna do and this is my calling and this is what I'm gonna step into.
Yeah, I watched all these guys the last couple years at youth group grow up and just be awesome young men. And then when they had to step out into life that's a little bit different and make their own decisions on their own and have the consequences of their own decisions and kind of just step into new opportunities, we got to sit down and just talk about those things, which has been good. And more make decisions not off of what my parents think or what I've always heard, but what is God asking me to do? And then stepping forward in those, like in that truth of who you are. So what Riley's doing might be different than what Isaiah does or what Sander does, but it doesn't mean they're not following God's path for their life. It just means that God has a different path for them. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, it does answer the question, and that I think it also begs it to like what do you think has been your role in teaching them and like teaching? I mean, me too. Like the times I've been there, it's like what's been your role, like seeing these men and then like okay, this is what I'm gonna talk about and this is what I'm gonna help them understand from the Bible. This is what God has called them to be, and this is what God is calling them to do. Like even on different like journeys and different paths, but this is what God is calling them as a young man of God following after God.
Yeah, so I grew up in the church and kind of had this view of what following God looked like. And there was a lot of just rules that we follow. And if we do these things, then God will do these things. And if we just follow what he says, then life will be good. And I thought, that's great. And then my life kind of got flipped around just because God decided to do different things than what I was planning in my life. I grew up and I wanted to be a youth pastor. And after 3 years of that, God was like, nope, we're going to do something else. I'm like, oh, okay. Well, what does that look like? And then when my son was born, we weren't expecting that he'd be such a huge blessing. And we spent 3 months on Oahu, which is a different island, and going back and forth. And it was a lot different than what we were expecting. And God was like, I just want to teach you something. So what I've learned these last couple of years is we need to step back from all these rules and things that we've learned and step into what are these opportunities that God's throwing into our lives and how do we interact with them. So instead of taking the Bible as a rule book, take it as this is the person that we follow, because God is a person. He's not just like a law book, but he's a person that wants to have a relationship with us. So we step back and look at what would Jesus do in this situation, not as a rule, but as a relationship. So, I mean, there's a lot of instances in our life where we say this person did the wrong thing and they should be punished for it, or this person did the right thing and they should get like a blessing or whatever, a reward for it. Get a reward, Riley. But that's not what God does all the time. Like he calls us to different things. And that is hard to kind of wrap my head around, to look at life and say, well, I thought if I did all these things right, then I would get this out of it. But God's like, I want you to go down this journey, but I'm going to take you somewhere that's a little bit different than what you're expecting. So when we talk with the guys and ask them questions, like I want them to see the world through those eyes of what God calls us to is to follow him. He doesn't call us to a bunch of rules. He doesn't call us to a bunch of sacrifices. He doesn't call us to the same thing for each person, but he calls us he comes and says, come and follow me. And what does that look like? And for Sander, it's different than for Isaiah. And they both had to make hard decisions every day. And some of them changed the trajectory of their life. And that's awesome, but it's hard. And to stand there with them and say, hey, what is God calling you to? You need to live out of that. Those are the conversations we have. So it's less of you could write a curriculum or a program for it and more of a one-on-one. What is God talking to you about? And what does he say? And what is he calling you to? And are you going to follow it? So what about you, Feston? What's he calling you to?
Oh, Mike. We're here for you, not for us.
Mike's firing off early.
I know he's already shooting, dude. So tonight I'm going to young adults, and like we're gonna talk. Just like I was looking at Romans 12, just talks about like what like, and then like it talks about like what a Christian should live like. What's your behavior like, and like what are those qualities? And like the first verses of Romans. The first verses of Romans, I'm just going to look at the Bible. The first verses of Romans, like the first two verses say, I appeal to you, therefore, brothers, by the mercies of God, to present your bodies as a living sacrifice, holy and acceptable to God, which is your spiritual worship. Do not be conformed to this world, but be transformed by the renewal of your mind, that by testing you may discern what is the will of God, what is good and acceptable and perfect. And like you just said, I think that's something I think God's been calling me to. It's like I've talked to this about, right? It's like being someone who is following God and like being like enjoying the journey of like, I'm just gonna sit and like wait and for God to direct my steps, and so just be like, I'll plan out what I want to do, and then I'm just gonna be like, God, you follow me with my plans. But I'd be like, God, what are your plans and what's your purpose for my life? So I was listening to this guy from Calvary Chapel, Ontario. I like his teachings. One like I like studying a book. Pastor Paul is talking about like what's a living sacrifice. It's like it's different from like the Old Testament where it was like you die, like you bring something that's already dead. If it's a crop, it's you've already harvested, it's not living anymore. But like for us, like Paul is saying, like we need to be a living sacrifice, which means like you said, you die to your like desires every day and you choose to sacrifice yourself to serve God. So I think that's something that I'm learning, and I'm still learning to like live as a living sacrifice every day because it's still a struggle. But yeah, I think that's what God is calling me to. Oh, it's just stuff for me. Okay, I get it.
Oh, no, I can keep going. I got more questions.
Yeah, so I think I like you touched about a little bit about your family. So for context, like I think I would assume that's what's made you like who you are right now. Like God has blessed you with a family, and that family has shaped you to be where you are right now. So just for a little bit, can you talk about your family? Like, I don't know if I like Riley who want to be talked about all the time, but can you just touch a little bit about your family and how that's helped you be the man you are right now?
Yeah, so I got married super early. We got engaged when she was still in high school. So why are you making that face? So she's walking around school with a diamond ring, huge diamond ring, like super rich. Right?
How old is she?
She was 18 on her 18th birthday. So is that okay?
I was just asking for the people listening at home.
Okay, so I got married young, and basically me and my wife, we ended up just growing up together. So we didn't really know much about life. We're like, we can do this. We can get married. We'll, go live our lives. And then we had no real wisdom. So we just started living our life, and we learned things together, which had been really awesome. And she's really, really sweet and looks at the best in people, where I'm normally more justice-wise. Like, if somebody does something, like, I'm going to get them back for that. But she's like, oh, they're probably having a bad day, and they just need to be loved. And after 20 years, I'm kind of starting to get that, like, understanding how she looks at the world, which has opened my eyes to how Jesus looks at the world. And I want to be more like that. So, I've been married for 20 years. She's amazing. And then I have a 17-year-old daughter, and she's awesome too. Just to watch her grow up and encourage the people around her and just live a life that shows Jesus to either the weak and the hurting, or to just tell truth to people who need it. And then I have a 15-year-old son who is wild and fun and probably shooting BB guns in the backyard right now. He was doing that when I left. So he was born with they call it a disability, but it's not a disability. He was born special, and his back was exposed when he was born. He had like this circle-looking thing in his spine. So they fused that all and put it back together. And we went to Oahu for a month, and we're like, oh, we can do this. It's no big deal. We had some money saved. Stayed at a condo for a month, and we're like, okay, great. We get out of the hospital, and we fly back to Maui because they said everything was fine, and his back starts leaking spinal fluid. And we're like, what? That's not right. So we go back to Oahu, And then we're like, oh, we can do this. He had an infection, so they were cleaning out the infection. So another month on Oahu. And so we're over there, and people would always take care of us when we went over there. We had a pastor give us a car for like the whole 3 months. And then, so he had a pastor give us a car for 3 months, and then people would put food in our fridge and things like that to come back and forth to work. So we came back, second time, we thought everything was good. Again, spinal fluid leaking out. Back over to Oahu. This time we were out of money, had basically nowhere to go, so we ended up at the Ronald McDonald House, and which is an awesome, huge blessing. It's like $20 a day instead of a $300 a day condo. So we were over there, and the first person I met, I like to talk to people, and I was like, hey, how's it going? And so I was talking to them and heard that their son died that morning. I was like, oh, I don't know if I can handle this, because this is my third time back to Oahu. I don't know what's going to go on. We don't know if my son's going to make it, kind of thing. And that was the first time that I felt like God, where God was like, I just want you to receive right now. And we used to be, or we have always been people that give, because we love to see people just receive blessings. And God just wanted to teach us what it's like to receive. And we had a month of just receiving from people in a really hard time, going back and forth to Ron McDonald House, just having nonprofits come and make you dinner. It was really cool, but like really humbling. And in that way, God started to show us that what he's called us to be is different than what I had always thought he'd called us to be. I thought it was like the more American dream of we'll go in and we'll do these things for people and they'll be blessed and it will be awesome and Jesus and America go together. And then I found out that Jesus always goes by himself, and you don't get to take
hearing this, Riley? Because you just you hearing that Jesus in America?
Yeah.
Were you following that conversation? Like, I just want you to repeat it for Riley.
Oh, Jesus and America are not the same thing.
Oh, really?
So it's not about taking our culture to the world. It's about taking Jesus. And now I've got to do that with my family. So we do a Tuesday night group with you guys, and it's awesome. Well, I think it's awesome. I don't know if you guys like it. We eat a lot of dessert and a lot of steaks, which is cool.
Yeah, it's good.
I feed Riley for like 3 days. But that is something that my family chose to do. It wasn't something that I necessarily thought up of, but my wife was like, hey, you should reach out to these young men and just challenge them to be who God's called them to be. And my son's helping out, getting the stuff ready. My daughter will cook dessert or cook food a lot of the time. And we decided to do that as a family. And now we just look at the world not as what can Mike do and my wife come alongside me or my kids follow, but what do we do as a family and how do we interact with the world? So that's kind of how I look at the world now. It's just a different way. And just to know that God's going to do things in spite of us, and he doesn't necessarily need me, but he chooses to let me go with him, which he says, come and follow me, which is pretty awesome.
Isaiah,
Preston.
I'm expecting you to have some questions for Mike, because this was your suggestion.
Okay,
All
I
right.
do.
So, all right, go ahead.
And don't say Nephilim or aliens or anything like that.
Oh, we'll save that for later. I'll try.
Okay.
So our last episode, or actually no, 2 episodes ago, we talked about how media affects like us as Christians as the world and the world today. And my question for you is, do you think, or how do you think, like modern media or like social media, how do you think that affects like men in the modern time?
I think it's an instant gratification thing where you can just pick up your phone and see whatever you want whenever you want it. And as men, we need to work for things. Like, it's good for us to work with our hands. It's good for us to work with our minds. It's good for us to strive after something. So even dating, or we'll just take dating, right? So even dating, if it comes easy, it's not good. Like, you need to be able to fight for something. Like, God has put it inside you that you need to fight for something and to conquer something. Not the girl. You don't need to conquer the girl.
What if there's some girls that are like, I like to challenge my man. Should we stay away from those?
I don't know. But it's good to have a challenge in your life. And the phone, what it does is or social media or anything, it just takes that challenge away. And then you're living a life that I want this now. And if I don't get it, I feel like God's not blessing me, or I feel like I'm not enough. And I feel like that my life is worthless because I don't get it right now. But most things in your life that are good, you have to work hard for and for a long time. So I had a friend talking with me and some other guys the other day, and he was asking me, or he was telling me, I want to have a marriage like yours. Like, you guys have something awesome. And just the way he said it, I hope you do. My marriage is awesome.
Yeah, I'm excited.
But the way he said it was like that it's something that we just have. And it's not. Like, we work super hard in our marriage to make it awesome. And it's a hard thing. Like, every day I got to wake up and be like, am I going to pursue her and love her, or am I going to do something that just gratifies what I want and demand something from her? Like, hey, the house isn't clean, or hey, this, or hey, how come you didn't go to work? Like, any of those things are not what I'm supposed to do. Like, I'm supposed to work hard so that our marriage grows. And that means we have a lot of communication. That means we struggle through things a lot of the time. But there's nothing that just comes easy in life. When it comes easy, it's normally not worth it.
I feel like the way you described that reminds me a lot of Feston and mine relationship, where I'm
You have to
working
work for it,
and
or
I'm
it's
gone and just providing for him. There's a lot of communication too that goes into it, and it's yeah, it's really grown.
How do you feel about that, Feston?
No comment. Do you have any questions for Mike?
So,
I'm going to take that as a yes.
yeah. Do you have like any verses or verse references that describe like how a man of God should act or how he should be?
I mean, there's a bunch. I was actually, when you brought up Romans 12, I was reading that last Sunday, I think. And when I read it, I was like, this is something I want to share with our leadership team for the youth. And the more I read it, I was like, I don't know if it's exactly what I was thinking, but it just talks about how Christians are to live. And I think, well, a lot of the Bible is written to men. I know somebody's going to hate that. I'm sorry. Sorry, Quincy. But the Bible is written to men, and it's calling them to a higher purpose, a higher life. So Romans 12 is awesome. The beginning of Proverbs 31 is amazing. You want me to just read it?
Yeah.
So we always talk about Proverbs 31 as like the woman that you're looking for. So the beginning of it, though, is the words of King Lemuel, an oracle that his mother taught him. What are you doing, my son? What are you doing, son of my womb? What are you doing, son of my vows? Do not give your strength to women, your ways to those who destroy kings. It is not for kings, O Lemuel. It is not for kings to drink wine, or for rulers to take strong drink, lest they drink and forget what has been decreed, and pervert the rights of all the afflicted. Give strong drink to the one who is perishing, and wine to those in bitter distress. Let them drink and forget their poverty, and remember their misery no more. Open your mouth for the mute. So this is for men. Open your mouth for the mute, for the rights of all who are destitute. Open your mouth, judge righteously, defend the rights of the poor and the needy. Like I think God calls us men to be like him. So when we read the Bible, we see what God's calling us to. So if you start at the beginning, he talks about he's creating the world, right? And he creates it, and it is good. And is that things that we are doing? So you can take each verse out of the Bible, and I think God is calling us as men to be like God, not to be little gods, but to be like him, to live as his image. And in that, we are leading the people around us. So what he calls a woman to is different than what he calls a man to, and it's not that it's subservient or that we have power over them, but it's that we have the responsibility. So God calls us as men to hold the responsibility of leading the women into the way that they need to go. So God does that for us. And if you go through the whole Bible, you can look at any verse or basically any story and you say, okay, what is God calling that man to? And it begs out of us, like, what is he calling me to? So Proverbs 31 has been one of my new favorites that I keep going to. There's the classic in Psalm 119, how does a young man keep his way pure? But a lot of those are like, how do we stay away from sin? I think 1 Timothy and 2 Timothy is awesome because Paul is calling Timothy to something bigger than himself. So you could take those whole two books, and that's what God is calling you to. Does that help?
Yeah, definitely.
So maybe Genesis through Revelation would be good. I don't know.
The whole Bible as
Yeah.
a reference.
If you could memorize that, it'd be good.
Yeah, I really liked when we went over Proverbs 31 the first time on the Tuesday night group, because we always think about it as just like, oh, I'm looking for my Proverbs 31 woman. But in the beginning, it talks about like the man and his mom, his wisdom that she's giving him, just that there's people out there who aren't really loved by anyone and no one's standing up for them. But God is calling you, and you have people in your life around you calling you to be that person to stand up for those. Because, like you said, God wants us to be like him. And I think when we live for God, we can see how good it is to be like changed by Jesus and become more like him. You eventually end up saying to yourself, like John the Baptist, that you want less of yourself and you want more of God because of what you've seen and experienced. And it's not always going to be the best times. Like, you've gone through a lot of hard things. We've all gone through some hard things, but I know that God has been faithful through those situations. And the more time we spend with him in prayer or reading or just with other people too who love Jesus, it's really cool to see what he does in your life and then calls you to things and you step out in faith. I've seen that with everyone here. I've seen it with my family, with people in the church. I'm just very encouraged by what God is doing and what he's going to continue to do also.
Yeah, two questions I love to ask young men is, one is, what are you passionate about? So what are the things that drive you that you're really excited about in life? And everybody always has something, but they think that that's their calling, as in their job or the things that they need to pursue. But a lot of times that's just the character that God's trying to build in them. And the second question is, what breaks your heart that breaks the heart of God? And I think right there lets you look at the world in a different way, and not, how do I fulfill all my desires, but what is broken in this world and what is God calling us to? And as you read through the Bible, that's what God is calling his men to. You look at Moses, you look at Paul, you look at John the Baptist, you look at any of the men in the Bible, God is calling them to be his ambassador for the things that are broken, to step out and say, I will not stand for that. I'm not okay with little girls being taken advantage of. I'm not okay with moms not having money to feed their kids. Like, there's so many things out in the world that we can just say, I'm not okay with that, not only because it makes me mad, but it breaks the heart of God. And when you have the same heart, when your desires are the same as the heart of God, then you look at the world in a different way. And it's not about how I can fulfill my desires, but it's how do I take Jesus to the world. We talk in youth a lot about, this is my best way, or my favorite way to say how we share Jesus with the world is, we don't take the Bible and we pound it over people's heads, although we read a lot of the Bible in our youth group. It's awesome. We're going through John forever, and we'll keep going forever, it sounds like. But it's not that, but we want to take these youth and take them to the feet of the Jesus that we know, and just ask God, like, do something with their lives as well. I wake up every morning and say, God, what do you want to teach me, and what do you want me to teach the people around me? And constantly he's teaching me new things, like, hey, you got this little thing in your life that you need to tweak a little bit. Like, this might not be a sin right now, but it's becoming like a bondage for you that you need to let go. And when we look at the world through the eyes of Jesus, and we look at the world as he did, like, the people that he helped were typically people who are down and out and struggling in life. And then as Americans, we'll look at those and be like, oh, those homeless people or those poor people or these people who are on drugs or prison, or like they get what they put into it, and they're like, oh, they just haven't put in enough, so they're not going to receive enough. Like they could have tried harder, basically, is what sometimes I think. And then we look at Jesus and he's like, oh, the prostitute, yeah, I'm going to be kind to her because nobody loves her. And you can stop looking at the symptoms of the problem, and you can start looking at the problem as the heart, and be like, man, God loves that person, and I will do whatever it takes so that I can take them to the feet of Jesus. And as men, that's what we get to do. We don't necessarily have to sit there and tell people what to do as leaders and be like, hey, you're here and I'm in charge of everybody. But we get to go and walk them to the feet of the Jesus that we know. And that puts a lot of burden on us as men, because it says, who is that? Who is this Jesus? Like, are you following a God who just punishes people for their wrongs? Are you following a God who opens the Red Sea? Are you following a God who leads his people through the desert by a pillar of fire? Are you following a God who says, hey, Peter, come and walk out on the water with me, and just like does things that are impossible? Not a logical God, but a God who changes the world so that he can meet his people. So when men start to act like men, they start to bring in the heart of God to the world and say, I'm willing to give this up so that I can show the world who God is. And that starts changing things. I mean, there's no like women's lib or anything like that is going to break that down, because you can say that men are worthless or you don't need them or dads aren't important. You can say all those things, but when dad shows up and he hugs his daughter, it changes her world. So when we say the war on masculinity, I think it's a war on laziness. So when we were in Wyoming, something that keeps sticking with me is Riley brought up that he doesn't want to be a lazy Christian. And we were sitting by the fire talking about this, and I just kept like mulling over that in my head. Like, what is it to be a lazy Christian? What does that mean if you're a lazy Christian? And it means you're just sitting, waiting for God to do something. And I think we do that as men. We become lazy men where we're like, oh, you know, life will just turn out. But life doesn't just turn out. You have to go and you have to seek things out, and you need to go conquer things, and you need to go fight for the things that you're passionate about. Because if not, evil will just take them over. Like, if you've ever built anything, it takes forever to, let's just say a relationship. Like, it takes forever to build up a good friendship or a good marriage. But I could change my mind tomorrow, today, and destroy my marriage just with some bad decisions. But it took 20 years to build that up, and I could destroy it in a moment. But there's no way I could just make that relationship happen in a moment. So if we step back and we let evil just step into our lives, and as men we just become complacent and don't do anything, the evil will slowly take over the world. And I think that's what's happening when we say the war on masculinity. It's not that the evil is so much harder, it's that the men are so much weaker, and they won't fight for things. So good job, men. These four guys are not those guys. These guys are men who fight, so it's awesome to watch.
I think what kind of fight? Because like there's different kinds of fight, and
not like Gavin fight, because he could beat all of us.
Yeah, so like you touched on like the differences between like when men step up and men don't step up. Like what's the? I mean, I think contrast. I would say what's the contrast between like that you see in the world, like this is the man who's not stepping up, and this is the man that's stepped up for his family. Like, what's that contrast? And, like, what are those qualities that you see? Like, yeah, he's married, but he's not stepping up to the plate. Or this guy's married, and he's stepped up to the plate.
Yeah, so there's a new thing that Jesus does in the book of John, and he says, a new covenant I give to you, to love others as I have loved you. And I think that's the difference for the people that don't step up to the plate, is they're loving how they want to be loved. And they're not loving how Christ loved the church. And they're not willing to give everything up for them. So when probably like 6 years ago, somebody gave me this book. It's called Strong Fathers, Strong Daughters. It is fantastic for any dad that has daughters. Read it. It will change your life. Because there's just a lot of things that as men that we don't know. And just that information helps us make better decisions. So I read in there that my daughter needs to have like safe physical touch. So she needs me to hug her when she comes in the house. She needs sometimes when we're walking down the street to hold her hand. And what that does is it makes her feel confident that she is worth it, that she's worthy to be loved. And I see a lot of men and a lot of dads, and this was me. I look at my daughter and she's like, she's become a woman. So me as a man, I need to step back and not put my hands close to this woman, right? But it was the opposite. Like, my daughter needs me to wrap my arms around her in a way that she can feel comfortable and loved. And she needs somebody just to sit with her when she's having a hard day. And she needs somebody when things are not as they are supposed to be, just to sit on her bed with her, put my arms around her, and just tell her that she's loved. And I think a lot of dads are not willing to do that. And it will destroy families because, one, it says to them that I'm not important and something's wrong with me. And then the other side of that is they're going to run to something that is not safe. They're going to run to a guy who's going to want to physically touch them in a way that's not beneficial. And as I'm reading this book called Strong Fathers, Strong Daughters, it just talked about how these girls would come into this, she's a doctor, a pediatric doctor. They'd come in and they would talk about all these like issues that they're having, but the real issue that was deep down was that they felt unloved. And me as a dad and as an older uncle, because I'm super old, right? I'm 40. Yeah, I know. So as an older guy, just to talk to women or younger women in a way where they feel respected and loved. Like I'll give them a high five and hold their hand for a second just to see like, hey, I see you, just so you know. You are loved. You are known and you are loved.
Like waffle or just normal high five?
I'm not like weird. I'm weird, but not like creepy. So it all depends on the person. But then other people could take advantage of that. But me as a man, like I need to decide what kind of guy am I going to be? Am I going to be creepy? Don't be creepy, right? That's definitely not a good idea.
Bad.
Any of you guys don't be creepy, right?
Yeah.
So how do we love the people around us? And the hardest thing is to love the vulnerable or the ones who don't have anything to give back. It's easy to love your friend. It's easy to love Riley because he'll, take care of you, right? He'll drive you around. But it's easy to love the people who are fun to love. It's hard to love the people who are struggling. And as men, we need to step back like Jesus did and say, I'm going to love you because you need to be loved and not because I'm going to get anything out of it. So love others as he has loved us. I think that's the difference in guys who are lazy and they're like, how come things aren't working out? Or, like I work super hard all day long. I work many, many hours and I come home and when I sit in my driveway, I turn off that truck, I think, okay, now I got to shut work off and I got to go be dad. I got to go be husband. And I'm not just going to walk in and sit on my couch and be like, oh, I had a hard day. I need to take some time. I need to walk in there and my kids need me and my wife needs me. So whether that's I'm cooking dinner, or I'm taking out the trash or just talking with her, it doesn't really matter, but I need to show up in a way where she feels known and loved and my kids feel known and loved.
Yeah, I've seen, for me, sometimes it's hard to know how to love people when they're going through something so hard and they feel so vulnerable in that, whether like it's a guy or a girl. Sometimes like I know that I love them, but I don't know how to show it, and I can worry too, like, well, I don't want to say too much, I don't want to say too little, and I just think to myself like, well, what am I even supposed to do for them? But I've seen just like actually being there, sometimes you don't really need to say much. Sometimes you just need to ask them how they're doing, or like if they're going through something hard or they're not feeling well, you just kind of take care of them in the ways that you can.
Yeah, and that's what being a man is. Like, you get to walk in and say, this isn't about me, it's about you. And not in a way where they take advantage of you or manipulate you. But I'm reading through John 11. We're going to be talking about that this week. And it's with Lazarus, right? And he dies, and then Jesus raises it from the dead. But in the middle of that, Jesus doesn't come in and say, what are you guys doing? Like, I can do miracles. He walks in, and he sees that people are hurting, and he sits down and he weeps with them, and he cries with them, and he holds them. Like, he's there with them. And I understand what you're feeling. Like, I get it. He was my friend too. I can't believe he's gone. So sad. And to just sit there and not say anything and just have that presence together says, we're on the same team, and you're known and you're loved. And like, guys are different than girls too. I don't know if you guys know that, but there's.
I think I figured that out.
We could talk about that a
I don't know
bit.
if other people know that, but
Okay.
I think so.
So, like, I'll be hanging out with my wife, and she'll ask a lot of questions, and she'll want to talk about things, and we'll be just having a lot of conversations, and that's how we feel connected. And then I'm hanging out with my son, and we'll just turn on some music, and we'll drive around, and we'll tell jokes, and we'll eat pizza, and we're like buddies. Like, that's the thing. So it's different for guys and girls, but if I was to go and just have all these deep conversations with my son, he'd be like, how come you don't want to do what I want to do? Like, I need to meet him where he feels loved. And when he feels loved, then he is confident about himself, and he can go out and impact the world for the good. But if he feels awkward and he doesn't know if he's loved or if he's safe, then when he goes out into the world, he's struggling with who he is, so he can't go and be loving to people because he's still struggling with him. And if you can be a man who goes out and empowers people to be who God's called them to be, then they can go out and do that to others. And when you continue to follow that cycle, then it started with a spark, and it became this huge flame that God is inspiring people around you. And I've seen that with you guys. Like, I just started asking questions, and not because I was trying to take you guys anywhere, but I wanted to learn and I wanted to know. And it's also things that I struggle with. Like, when I'm teaching through the Bible, I'm like, these are things that I'm literally going through that I want to talk with you guys about, because I think you guys have different insight into the world. And the more insight we can have together, we can come around each other and inspire each other to be who God's called us to be. And it's hard. Like, Sander, we've been talking about things. Isaiah, we've been talking about things. Riley, we've talked about many, many things. We're going to start talking more with Festin after, this earlier conversation. But you have to make decisions in your life that look different than your parents. It looks different than your friends. It looks different than what you think needs to happen. But God's like, hey, Isaiah, I'm calling you to this. Will you follow me? And your only answer can be, yeah, let's go. Let's see what's going on. And if you say no, then you're just going to miss out on opportunities. And as men, I think it's not as much as we disobey as, well, you guys. I'm sure there's tons of men out there who are just disobeying. But it's not that we disobey as much as that we just sit back and, like, I don't want to do anything. Like, I'm just lazy.
Yeah, so you've touched a little bit about this, but I think I've heard you say it's like something you live for, which is to make people feel loved and feel seen. And I think you gave me an example of a girl on your street. I think the last time we talked about this was for the girl on your street who you made sure that she felt loved and she felt seen. So, and I think you've also talked about it as your purpose, right? You can confirm nor deny, but like, I think can you touch on that and like how do you like live that out loud, like in line with what God is calling you to do? It's just sort of just like, oh, it's just my thing, I do it.
Yeah, so the questions that I ask are, what are you passionate about, and then what breaks your heart? So the things that I'm passionate about is that men become men. So not that we just live in this like, oh, okay, we're old boys, but that we are men and we're running out into doing the things that God's called us to do, which is going to be hard. And that's what he's called you to do. And what breaks my heart is to see the vulnerable, the ones who don't have any say about what goes on around in their life, that like what breaks my heart is that people take advantage of them. And I'm not okay with that. So there's a girl, there's a family across the street from us, and they have lots of kids, and they're awesome. They love Jesus. They live lives that are just passionate and exciting, and they actually ended up adopting a boy and a girl from a friend of theirs who passed away. So in the will, they were number one pick for the kids, and they're like, yeah, we'd love to take
Who's the
them.
number one pick for Zach?
Well, I don't know if we can say that. Can we say that on here?
Well, I think
It has to be a family member.
can't be
Maybe.
you,
Wait, I don't think number one pick for Zach can be a family member. What do you mean?
Like, if you guys die in your will Zach go to
Feston or
like a sibling or
God,
on someone's side? Feston's just a little worried he's going to him.
he's not going to you.
I'm not worried. I'm just asking.
So this wasn't a family member. So these were just friends, and they're kind of like godparents. So we have a lot of people have asked us. So we're like, oh yeah, of course we would take your kids in. But now we have like 8 or 9 of them on a list that if they were all to die, like on a plane crash, I'd have 9 extra kids. Like, oh, that's not what I expected, but thank you, God. Let's run the blessing. So anyways, this girl lives across the street, and she grew up with people around her that didn't inspire her to be who she needs to be. And they kind of let her whine, and they let her do her thing. And when you look at her, she could go down this path of, just what the world says of, I should do these things and people think I'm pretty and, just to kind of get validation. And I was not okay with that. So I looked at this girl who had all of the traits of just being taken advantage of. And I was like, I'm going to come around her and I'm going to inspire her to be like, I want to be the cool uncle that's like, loves to see her, high fives.
Oh, it's all our dreams. To
Yeah,
be the cool uncle.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm hoping to be
Some
the
of
cool
us
grandpa
are.
in a little bit. So
Oh.
couple years. So this, like, what breaks my heart is that she would not have an opportunity to be loved, and she would be taken advantage of. So our family just kind of, we didn't adopt their family, but we spent so much time with them, and my goal was that these girls in this family know that they are known and loved. And their dad is awesome, and their mom is awesome. But with so many kids, and I mean, you see this like in the youth, even if you continue to pour in them from a parent, it kind of just goes over their head sometimes. But when somebody else from the outside sees them and tells them like who they are and what's true about them in their life, it changes who they are. I have people in my life that did that to me. So, I mean, that's kind of that story. But does that answer your question?
Yeah, it answers my question, but then it also partially answers my question, but also doesn't answer my question. So what I'm asking is like, because if, like you've said, that's your purpose. That's something God has called you to do. Like, how do you walk that? Because you said, like you said, it's a fine line between being creepy and being cool and being loving, and then just be like, I'm just going to take advantage of you. So, like, how do you walk that line in line with what God has called you to do it, and then in line with, like, your other call, which is to something that you're passionate about, which is seeing, like, men become men, boys become men, and then, like, something that also breaks your heart, which is seeing people getting taken advantage of. Like, how do you walk those two? Because I think they're aligned in a way that, like, I think men that are not following God tend to take advantage of those kind of women, like those kind of girls and those kind of people. But also, like, I think the question is, like, what's the fine line and how do you walk that in a way that's glorifying to God and also points them to God instead of like, oh, Uncle Mike loves me. But, like, to see that God loves them more than you do.
I think it's a consistency thing where you can constantly come around them and just be consistent and loving and never cross that line. So it's an easy line to cross. There's lots of people who do it, and it's horrible. And what it does is it takes a great relationship and it destroys the person around them. And what you don't want to do is that. So when you look back at the Bible and you look at Jesus, he didn't really care what people thought. He was just going to do what God called him to do. So it's that, am I walking in the dust of my rabbi? Am I walking close under the feet of who Jesus is? Am I following him? And when he says, hey, Mike, that person needs a high five, or that person needs to feel loved, or just go ask them a question. And if I go do those things, then God is going to continue to bless that. But if I walk in and say, oh, in my power, I can do this, then that's when the creepy stuff starts coming out, because it's about you and it's not about them. So you need to focus on what God's calling you to do, because you are an ambassador for him. You are literally his hands and his feet. And he says, Isaiah, would you go talk to that person? And when
Isaiah's probably the feet.
No, Isaiah's the hair, guaranteed. And the muscles, and yeah. Riley's the brains. Sanders the good looks.
What's that?
Isaiah, Riley's what? The brains?
Riley's the brains.
Dude, I'm so smart.
I don't think smart people have to tell you they're smart.
And so humble. He's just so...
Yeah.
He told me that. But when we follow Jesus in the way that he's asked us to follow him, to deny ourselves, pick up our cross, and follow, then you're not doing the creepy things, because it's not about you. It's about them. Does that help?
That answers
Yeah.
my question, yes.
When we had Kirk on, that's what he talked about so much, was self-denial. And yeah, it's really cool, kind of back to back the last two episodes that we've recorded, that's such a big thing, is self-denial and not making it so much about yourself and how you can make their life better, really, but how God can use you and you can give the glory back to him for the good work that he's doing.
Yeah.
Yeah,
so-
and then like you can see the blessings, other people see the blessings, and it's just cool how God does that.
Isaiah?
Are you out of questions?
Yeah.
Oh, I got so many. Can I ask questions?
Yeah. For Feston
I'll let you
You gonna
guys go
turn the
first.
tables?
or Xander?
Xander didn't ask any questions.
Xander
I
didn't
think
say
you should-
anything.
Xander hasn't
Yeah,
said
so
anything.
you should ask him, because he didn't say anything. He needs to get on the mic. People need to know he was here. Not
He's still
just like-
alive. He is still alive.
It's a four people podcast, so people need to know he's alive and well.
Sandra, are you here?
Yeah, I'm here. Yeah.
Say it into the mic.
That's the question.
I'm like sitting right here, like right next to my. Right here.
All right, so I guess that concludes it. Brad, before we conclude, a few fire questions for Mike. So,
What's your favorite movie?
I think
We
the-
know
I
it.
think you know the right answer to this. You don't want to disappoint Ciara, do you?
Oh,
What's your favorite?
I think
What's
the
not
right-
not Ciara's? What's your favorite movie?
So describe favorite movie. Like, I would go and turn it on right now.
Yeah.
Like that movie you can always watch without getting bored.
Oh man, like the end of the new Top Gun.
The end?
The end, just when they're like flying through and like, and then they shoot the thing, bam, and they come up and like, pew, pew, pew.
You want to go to the movies? Yes. So let's just time it for the end. That's it.
You can ask Zach. I'll say almost every night, like, hey, you want to watch the end of Top Gun? He's like, no, I'm so over it. That
All right.
full movie would probably be Princess Bride's, like, epic. What else is there out there?
I think it was one, Mike.
I like Cowboys and Aliens. I don't know if you've ever seen that. That's.
Isaiah's seen it. Look at him smile.
Have you seen it?
I haven't seen it yet.
Should we have a movie night?
We should.
Okay.
I haven't seen it either.
It's weird, but
We like weird.
Aliens
sometimes.
are weird.
most people say it's not real. And like, it's called Cowboys and Aliens. So
How can it not be
unless you're
real?
Timothy Alberino, it has to be
All right. So what's that one song you've been repeating this year?
song.
Mm-hmm.
I got a bunch and nobody's going to know any of them.
Yeah, we just want one. Don't mention yours. We know you make music, but you made music. We know you made music, but don't mention yours.
Okay. So I like to listen to ska. You guys know what that is?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's fantastic. It's like lots of horns and stuff. So one of my favorite songs of all time is it's by Five Iron Frenzy. It's the last one on their second album. What's it called? It's not Every New Day, but it might be Every New Day. That's like my favorite song.
Okay.
And then, my favorite one right now is Always Yours by Need to Breathe. You ever heard that one?
Nope.
You
But
guys
Need
ever
to-
read...
Need to Breathe is good, though.
Yeah, I like them.
You ever read
No.
That Hideous Strength by C.S. Lewis?
No.
Oh, guys, come on.
No, we're slacking.
So good. But the end of that song is like what I hear when I read that book. So it's so
All right.
fun.
Favorite verse?
Favorite verse. So it's Philippians.
You can do all things through Christ. Things.
Why do you laugh? Is that bad?
It's like everybody's favorite verse when they were about to do something. It's like, I don't think Jesus meant it for that. Like, I'm going to go rob a bank. Philippians, I can
Okay.
do all things through Christ.
It is Philippians 2, and it starts in verse 14. It says, "Do all things without grumbling or disputing, that you may be blameless and innocent children of God, without blemish in the midst of a crooked and twisted generation, among whom you shine as lights in the world, holding fast to the word of life."
All right. That's 4 questions, I think. The last question from me would be, what has God been teaching you for the past 5 years?
5 years. Gosh, he teaches me new things all the time.
Yeah, but for the past 5 years, I think there's something that's been like every year standing out. Right?
Yeah, so probably the big thing would be how simple it is to follow Jesus. That it's not easy, but he doesn't ask for much. He just says, "Come and follow me." So it's so simple, but it doesn't make sense to ask. We're like, "Oh no, let me check off all these boxes." He's like, "No, just follow me." Like, well, what you're asking me to do sounds illogical. And he's like, "Okay, cool, come follow me." Well, I'm gonna lose my money. He's like, "Okay, follow me." So that's like the big thing. But in the last probably 6 months, he's been teaching me what it looks like to trust him, and that I have this view of what certain things should be. Like, we went to Wyoming, and I had this view of what leading this Wyoming retreat would look like. And if I'm going to put my name on it, it's going to look like this. And, oh, Mike did this. And it kind of became about me. And God just kind of broke all those things down. He said, "Hey, everything you were planning on, we're not going to do that." And I'm like, "Oh, great, awesome." And it wasn't super planned out, and we didn't know what we were doing every day. But we went there, and God was like, "Just trust me." And he started to do miraculous things every day where, it would, like, things that would just blow my mind. And he kept asking me, "Do you trust me? Do you trust me? And do you trust that I'm good?" Like, okay.
Do you?
I do.
Okay.
I do.
I just wanted to make sure.
Yeah.
Any other questions?
What would your perfect day look like?
Doing a podcast with my 4 buddies after a long day of work.
That was the right answer.
That was good. Yeah, that was a good answer.
I'd like a good day surfing, just like right hand barrels and just pull in and just blow out. Yeah. Yeah. Whapa. I was like, dude. What would your perfect day be?
My perfect day would be wake up
Yeah, how
around
quick he answered that. He was waiting for you to ask him.
around like
Riley, can you
8:30.
talk about yourself real quick?
8:30.
Yeah, 8:30. That's a pretty good time. Eat breakfast. Probably eat. Toast a bagel, cream cheese the bagel, make eggs and bacon, put it on the bagel with a little bit of cheese. Eat that. Go to Lani Poco. Get the rising tide around like 11. Surf all day. Go home, or go see my friends, or go to Poli's. I don't know. Anything like that would be my perfect day.
So, breakfast, surfing.
Breakfast
friends.
seems pretty important to you.
Yeah, you
Yeah.
had that all lined up, and you're like, I don't know, maybe hang out with my friends, but definitely breakfast with a bagel.
Yeah.
All right. I think that concludes the episodes, right? The episode with the Mike Woodard. What was the middle name again?
Morgan.
Yeah.
Oh, Morgan.
Why do you say it like that?
Like what?
Ooh, Morgan.
Yeah.
Ooh,
Oh, son.
Mike.
Ooh.
All right. Thank you for joining us. If you've been listening to us, thank you for sharing our episode. If you have shared it, thank you for following us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts from. If you have done that, if you haven't yet, and you just listen to us without subscribing, we have a little problem with you. We need you. We need to talk to you. So yeah, thanks very much. I hope to see you again on the next one. We're out.